The secret network that owns every dollar on Earth, they say. Money makes the world go round. But what if I told you the world doesn't own its money? Every dollar in your pocket, every euro in circulation, every digital transaction you make, all of it traces back to a network of institutions that most people have never seen, don't understand, and can't question. This isn't a story about rich families or shadowy elites. It's a story about a global system, one that quietly decides the value of your labor, the price of your food, and the future of entire nations. So here's the mystery. If every government borrows money, if every bank owes money, and if every person is in debt, who actually owns the money? Because someone does. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly who and how they built a financial web so powerful that it controls every dollar on Earth. Section 1, Origins 1:30 to 430. To find the beginning of this network, we have to go back to the 17th century, when Europe was drowning in war, and kings were drowning in debt. England, like every empire before it, discovered that conquering the world was expensive. Cannons, ships, soldiers, they all required funding. But instead of raising taxes, which caused revolts, the British Crown stumbled upon a new trick: borrowing from private financiers. In 1694, a group of wealthy merchants offered the king a deal. They would lend him £1.2 million at interest. In exchange, they'd get to create a bank, one that could issue notes backed by that royal debt. That bank became known as the Bank of England, the prototype for every central bank that followed. This was the birth of monetized debt. From that moment, money stopped being gold, silver, or anything tangible. It became a promise, a liability created out of nothing, backed by the future productivity of a nation. And as this model spread, it created a new power class: those who controlled credit, not gold. Section 2. The rise for 8 o'clock. Over the next 2 centuries, central banking became the hidden engine of global empires. Napoleon's wars were financed by bankers in London. American railroads were built on debt issued by Wall Street. And every revolution, every economic boom, carried the fingerprints of one thing: credit expansion. Credit has a cost: interest, and interest demands growth. That's why the modern world became addicted to expansion. To pay yesterday's debts, you must create tomorrow's money. By the early 20th century, this system had gone global. But it was chaotic. National currencies floated. Gold backed some, others defaulted, and no one really trusted anyone. Then came 1913, in the United States, after decades of financial panics. A group of powerful bankers met secretly at Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. Their goal: design a system that would stabilize the economy, but also centralize control. The result? The Federal Reserve System? The U.S. didn't just create another bank. It created a mechanism through which money could be created at will, backed not by gold, but by debt: U.S. Treasury bonds. From that day on, every dollar in circulation was borrowed into existence. When you take a loan, you owe interest. When the government borrows, the entire nation owes interest. And the creditors? They're not just other governments. They're a global web of private institutions, bondholders, and central banks, each owning a piece of every dollar ever printed. Section 3. The breaking point: 8 o'clock to 11:30. For decades, the illusion held. The dollar was as good as gold, and the U.S. dominated global finance. But in 1971, that illusion broke. Foreign governments, especially France, started demanding gold for their dollars, and the U.S. didn't have enough to cover it. So President Richard Nixon made a decision that changed history. He closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer backed by anything physical. It became pure debt, a currency backed by confidence alone. The consequences were immediate: inflation, oil shocks, and massive financial volatility. But behind the chaos, something else was happening. The world quietly shifted into a debt-based global economy. Money could now be created infinitely, as long as someone was willing to borrow it. And central banks became the puppet masters, pulling the strings of supply, interest, and liquidity, not through physical assets, but through digital keystrokes. By the time the 2008 financial crisis hit, the game had gone full circle. Banks had created trillions in derivatives, loans, and synthetic assets, promises backed by promises. When it all collapsed, central banks stepped in again, not to fix the system, but to save it from itself. They printed more money, trillions, and bought the very assets they had once backed. Section 4. The fallout and failed fixes 1130 to 1530 in theory. This money printing or quantitative easing was supposed to stabilize markets. In practice, it concentrated wealth like never before. Between 2008 and 2023, the world's billionaires added over $10 trillion to their net worth, while average wages stagnated. Asset prices, stocks, real estate, commodities soared. Meanwhile, the real economy lagged behind. Why? Because the new money never reached the public. It stayed within the system, cycling through banks, funds, and governments, enriching the top while indebting the rest. Central banks had become what some economists now call the new sovereigns, unelected, untouchable, and interconnected through networks like the BizBank for international settlements in Switzerland. The Biz, quietly founded in 1930, is often called the central bank of central banks. It sets the rules, coordinates policy, and maintains secrecy. It operates above national law, immune from taxation and oversight. In other words, it's where the invisible architecture of global finance resides. This is the network that owns every dollar on earth, not a single organization, but a hierarchy of debt creators, central banks, transnational lenders, and financial institutions, each profiting from the same mechanism, your obligation to repay. And every time governments fix a crisis by borrowing more, the network grows stronger. Section 5. Modern parallels to 1530 to 1830 today. The illusion is digital. Over 90% of all money now exists only in electronic form, digits and databases controlled by private institutions. Central banks no longer just influence the economy. They're preparing to own it directly through CBDCs or central bank digital currencies. The promise? Efficiency and safety. The reality? Total traceability and control. Every transaction, every purchase, every transfer visible, programmable, and reversible. If physical cash once gave you anonymity, digital money will give you dependency. And that's the ultimate expression of ownership, not through possession, but through control of access. If you can't move money without permission, you don't own it. You rent it from the same network that has owned every dollar, every note, every digital token since the day money became debt. Section 6. Takeaways, warning, and call to action, 1830 to 20 o'clock. So what do we take away from this? First, money is not wealth. It's a claim on future labor, controlled by those who issue it. Second, the global financial system is not broken. It's working exactly as designed, to consolidate, control, and extract value from debt. Third, every major reform, from gold to fiat to digital, has only deepened that control. The warning is simple. As money becomes fully digital, the power to create and destroy it will become absolute. What began as a convenience could end as a chain, invisible but unbreakable. But here's the open question. Will this network remain hidden forever, or will people finally learn how to see it? The next chapter of money is already being written, and it's being written in code, not ink. Because the future isn't just about who owns the money. It's about who controls the meaning of money itself. If you found this story eye-opening, don't let it end here. Dig deeper, ask harder questions, and subscribe because the next episode uncovers the true origins of the debt that built the modern world.